Date: 15 October 1944. The war has turned against Germany, and Allied forces are advancing on all fronts. However, today an event occurs that is not recorded in the history books we know. Deep within the Harz Mountains, at the Wewelsburg underground facility, a team of the SS's most elite scientists and occult researchers are working on Projekt Loki. This is not a weapon, but an armor. More precisely, it is an invisibility device. Its basic operating principle goes beyond radio waves. It is a system that manipulates the atomic vibrations of matter, effectively bending light and even radio waves, rendering the target completely invisible and undetectable. However, another fundamental component of Loki comes from a material unimaginable at the time, an experimental element derived from heavy water obtained from occupied Norway. This element forms the core of the device and serves as its energy source. The first human test is conducted on SS Captain Klaus Richter. When the device is activated, Richter's body transforms into a shimmering, phantom-like shadow within the room, and then vanishes. He becomes invisible, undetectable even with infrared goggles. The test is recorded as successful. At that moment, Richter's report sends a chill down the spine. While it was active, I heard the sounds around me, muffled, distorted, and meaningless. I felt as if I was in the same dimension, but not at the same time. These words are the first clue to the horrific truth that the project team is not yet aware of. The device was not merely providing invisibility. It was creating permeability between layers of reality. Captain Richter is ready for his first operation. His mission is to infiltrate an Allied command center in France and obtain critical information. When the Loki device is activated, everything begins according to plan. He passes through enemy lines, almost like a ghost, without anyone noticing. However, the longer he uses the device, the more strange phenomena Richter begins to experience. The conversations of the soldiers around him become increasingly muffled and incomprehensible, as if he were underwater. The world around him turns into a gray-toned photograph that shakes from time to time. Even more unsettling is that he begins to see shadows. These are shapeless forms resembling human silhouettes, yet possessing no physical presence, that follow Richter's movements. He can only glimpse them out of the corner of his eye. They vanish when he looks directly at them. Meanwhile, at the laboratory in Wewelsburg, the brilliant physicist Dr. Werner Schmidt, who headed the project, was analyzing the data coming from the device. Occult researcher SS officer Karl von Junger, however, had different concerns. He reiterates warnings found in ancient texts about a veil between two worlds, and how lifting this veil would unleash the world of spirits and the forgotten. Schmidt accuses him of wasting time on unscientific superstitions. Yet Richter's reports prove von Junger's concerns justified. Richter writes in one of his reports, "It is not only me who is invisible. Those here, or the things here, also make me invisible, and some of them have now noticed me." 17 November 1944. Captain Richter is sent to the Belgian front for a second reconnaissance mission. The Loki device has been upgraded, but its operational time is limited to 90 minutes, as it offers no protection against the phenomena he calls shadows. However, this time, things unfold differently. As Richter passes through the middle of an Allied unit, he notices that the steady, hissing sound from the device suddenly stops and is replaced by a deep, almost organic hum. At that moment, the world around him freezes. The soldiers' movements, their running, the leaves falling from the trees. Everything seems frozen for an instant. In the gray-toned image, a silhouette emerges from the shadow of a nearby tree, darker and denser than the other shadows. This time, it doesn't run away. It stands directly opposite Richter, staring at him with a faceless void. Richter instinctively reaches for his pistol, but the trigger feels frozen, immovable. At that moment, a single word echoes in his mind with physical pressure. Sign. This is not a sound, but a pure meaning, a command. But pressure is so powerful that Richter temporarily loses his sight and collapses to the ground. When he regains consciousness, the device is once again emitting its normal hissing sound. The world has returned to normal, and the shadow is gone. However, on his left wrist, a mark has appeared that wasn't there before. A faint purple discoloration beneath the skin, resembling a complex geometric tattoo. When he returns to Berlin, Dr. Schmidt examines this mark and is horrified. This is a phenomenon they had defined in the device's theoretical calculations as evidence of an external interaction, but had never observed. For Schmidt, this was no longer an occult matter, but a measurable, proven physical reality. The field created by the Loki device did not merely provide invisibility. It opened a microscopic tear in the fabric of spacetime, and something was seeping through it. Richter finds von Junger. When he explains the situation, von Junger's face turns pale. He brings him a manuscript from the 15th century that mentions the kingdom beyond sight. The text speaks of formless beings living in the shadow of this world, and how the only way to communicate with them is to mark the door of one's soul. The mark on Richter's wrist is almost identical to a drawing in the text. After this discovery, the pair feel unsafe and go to Dr. Schmidt's office. They find him at his desk, holding the core of the Loki device, that strange Norwegian element, in his hand. Schmidt begins to speak, his eyes tired and fearful as he looks at them. "Don't misunderstand me," he says, his voice trembling. "Our goal was invisibility, but I made a mistake in my calculations. Or perhaps it wasn't a mistake. Perhaps it was an invitation." He points to the device's core. This element, it doesn't just emit energy. It also constantly broadcasts a signal at a frequency we cannot perceive. A call. Loki wasn't armor, he was bait. The more we used him, the more we opened the door for them. And I think, now those on the other side of the door want to keep track of who comes and goes. A heavy silence falls over the room. The project's purpose has shifted from winning the war to unwittingly inviting an uncontrollable threat. The mark on Richter's wrist is indistinguishable from a tracking device. December 1944. Captain Richter is no longer merely a test subject, but a carrier. The mark on his wrist tingles slightly in cold weather, and even glows faintly when Richter is in a state of intense alertness. Even when the Loki device is not in use, it continues to emit a low level of energy in the background of the laboratory. Dr. Schmidt suspects this is a state he refers to as passive listening mode. Meanwhile, on the Western Front, the Germans achieve an unexpected success. In the Battle of Bastogne, a small German reconnaissance unit manages to ambush an Allied unit, superior in numbers and equipment. However, the statements of the few surviving Allied soldiers are peculiar. They claim to have been choked by an invisible hand, their weapons suddenly jammed, or their communication equipment malfunctioned for no apparent reason. British intelligence attributes these reports to war stress. However, for Dr. Schmidt, von Junger, and Richter, the situation is clear. The effects of the Loki device have begun to spread independently of its operator. The shadows are no longer visible only when the device is active. With their permission or attention, reality itself is being locally distorted. This is not a weapon, but an uncontrolled infection. Richter, about to fall asleep one evening, feels that pressure in his mind again. This time, it is not a word, but a series of coordinates and a time frame. 16 December, 1944, 0530. The Ardennes, the starting time and place of the Battle of the Bulge. He realizes that they are not merely observing, but actively attempting to influence the course of the war. Their purpose is impossible to discern: assistance or creating an opportunity for greater chaos. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the trio, Schmidt, von Junger, and Richter, hold a final meeting. They agree that Projekt Loki must be destroyed immediately. However, the SS leadership is pressuring them to use the device actively before the offensive. They must make a decision. Schmidt calculates that theoretically, a chain reaction caused by the excessive heating of the element in the core could destroy the device and everything it is in contact with. But there is a price. The person who will trigger the reaction is Richter, due to his unique bond with the device. And for him, this will be a point of no return. The signal is a door, von Junger explains quietly. You will lock that door from the inside. It is not unreasonable that the price is the door itself. Richter does not hesitate. He already feels that the war is over for him. This is a chance to prevent a greater catastrophe. The plan is to destroy the device and the connection on the morning of 16th December, when the Battle of the Bulge begins, precisely when they plan to intervene. 16 December 1944, 5:20. Deep within the Ardennes forest, at a secret German forward outpost, Richter makes his final preparations. The device is set up for a standard invisibility operation. The SS generals believe he will infiltrate behind Allied lines. Richter shakes hands with Schmidt and von Junger one last time. Words are unnecessary. 5:29. Richter activates the device. That familiar vibration and gray world returns, but this time it is different. The shadows are immediately there, dozens of them, not just watching, but waiting like a crowd. At 5:30, Richter channels all his will and concentration into the device's core via the apparatus Schmidt designed. The signal in his mind ignites like a flame. The whine from the device reaches a deafening scream. At that moment, a strange occurrence is reported across the entire Ardennes front. A random flash of lightning in the sky, a 1-minute interruption in all radio communications, and a sudden profound dizziness and sense of déjà vu among soldiers on both sides. Only silence remains in the dugout where Richter is located. The device and Richter have melted away where they stood. Nothing remains but slightly melted and vitrified soil. The shadows are gone. The Bulge offensive begins as planned, but without the help of that hidden hand. History flows as we know it. The offensive does not bring ultimate victory for the Germans. After the war ended, Allied intelligence discovered the laboratory at Wewelsburg. Dr. Schmidt and von Junger were missing. They had probably managed to escape. Most of the documents had been destroyed. However, a CIA agent found a small notebook wedged behind a cupboard. Inside, written in Dr. Schmidt's handwriting, are the following sentences. "We built it as a door, but those on the other side of the door had the key long before. While our aim was invisibility, theirs was exposure. What they tried to show us was that we were not absolutely alone, and that our neighbors were not at all friendly. Projekt Loki is over, but they are still there, just watching, waiting for the next invitation." This note, the only written evidence of Projekt Loki, was classified and left behind, waiting for years on a dusty shelf in an archive for those like you who seek out true stories.